Gosh, yes, this is a really weird experience. I literally cannot see if there's anyone at the other end of the camera. So hopefully there are some people, and this will be interesting to some of you. So starting off with just a little bit about me and I guess why I'm giving this talk. So this is a hashtag, a tweet that I sent that was making the rounds on Twitter. So hashtag my path to civil service. And I really enjoyed the simplicity of it. So I'm using it here to boil down my career into a super quick summary. Though obviously this was a while ago because I don't work at DWP Digital anymore. I work at Co-op Digital. So I'm actually no longer a civil servant. But I thought this was kind of a good way of summarising where I've been and what I've been doing in my career so far. So I started in marketing. A long time ago, I joined the Ogilvy Fellowship Scheme, which works with lots of big brands like Dove and Unilever, more broadly, BT, things like that. And actually, I think there's a really good synergy between good marketing and digital service design. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the skills that you need and why some of those actually might be developed in a marketing background. So yeah, I started in an advertising grad scheme in the kind of Mad Men world. And then I decided that I wanted to apply those skills to a different sector, a different kind of product, I guess. So I went to the Science Museum in London and I was doing their marketing there for a while. And then I moved to Unilever. So I went to the other side, so client side advertising. And that's when I was working on the Dove Self-Esteem project. So that was one of the first times that I worked on like a corporate social responsibility kind of piece. And then from that, I moved into the civil service and I've held a few different roles in the civil service, starting with like digital engagement and then moving into product management when I started at the Government Digital Service, and then also at DWP Digital. And the last role that I took was at the end of my first maternity leave, which was 6 months ago with Co-op Digital. So I've been there for 6 months now. I've had the title product manager, senior product manager, lead product manager, senior product owner, and I'm now just product manager. There isn't a linear kind of way of dealing with those kind of changes and career. So yeah, I've been manager for a while, and I'm sharing basically my insights on what it's like to do that job. Yes, so I should probably address the elephant in the room, which is that you had one thing on your description of what this session was going to be, and now I'm talking about something else. Product manager, product owner, project manager, they all kind of sound a little bit the same and can and are often used interchangeably, actually. So I'm going to talk about some of the more commonly held differences between these three. But that isn't to say that when you are potentially applying for jobs that your future employer will hold the same definitions that I'm about to give you. That's because everybody understands these things a little bit differently. And so even if these are the most common definitions, it doesn't necessarily mean that your employer will be that au fait with the difference between the three of them. So it's always worth delving into the detail of what your bosses are expecting from you when you're applying for a job or when you're joining a new organisation. I actually started, when I started at the Government Digital Service, which if any of you know anything about that organisation will know that it's kind of the home of agile and digital ways of working in the government. So you'd think they would have this down. I actually started a role there that was advertised as a product manager job. And when I talked to my new boss about what I was going to be doing, it became pretty clear that actually the job was content design role. So luckily, they're a really flexible and awesome organisation, and my boss was fantastic. And so I was able to show how they actually did need a product manager as well and make the case to hire a content designer, but definitely would advise knowing this in advance if you're joining an organisation. So worth doing your homework and talking to them about their specific needs. So product owner is the title that this talk was given. And product owner is a very specific role as defined by the Scrum methodology. And I have done Scrum Alliance training. And they are super duper clear on what each role in the team does and how you get stuff done. It's very regimented. And so if you join an organization that follows Scrum and is advertising a product owner role, it's really easy to just Google what you're supposed to be doing, and you would hope that if you joined it, your team would all be completely au fait with exactly what you should be doing and giving you those kind of responsibilities. But in my experience, having been hired as a product owner, that wasn't my experience. And I don't think I know many organizations that actually work to the very strict Scrum Alliance kind of definition of an agile team, which I kind of support, because from my perspective, I think that removes some of the flexibility, which is kind of the point of an agile way of working. So yeah, I would say that the product owner role is very it's very specific. It has a lot of specific tasks. It talks a lot about backlog refinement, prioritization, decision making. It's very much a role within the team, and it's very much focused on prioritization. So that is the definition of product owner that Scrum would adhere to, and that would be most common, I think, as a definition across the industry. Then there's project manager. And again, like a lot of, and I think I've seen some talks about the project management were part of this whole move to digital kind of event as well. So you probably had much better talks on what project management is. So I won't go into what it is. I'll go into the difference between this and product management. And I found this definition that you can see on the slide at the moment on a Medium article that one of my colleagues recommended to me. And I thought it was really good because it defines the roles in terms of the type of project rather than the type of behaviors, because I think all of these roles have similar behaviors around them and responsibilities. They all talk about prioritization and value and managing people's expectations and things like that. But in a project manager's world, the start and finish is predefined, and what you're delivering is predefined, and there's a finish date essentially, because it's a predefined project, whereas a project manager will own a living thing that keeps going and like may morph into other things and may involve different types of work in the future. So yeah, so that's a project manager. And then I'm not very artistic. This is clearly why I'm not a designer in my team. But this is kind of my definition of a product manager. So when I kind of like looked on the internet, product managers generally are seen to be more strategic. They're more outward facing and more likely to spend time with the business. So like marketing, finance, and other parts of the organization. They look for kind of growth opportunities and trends in the market. And I guess I would say I am the most outward facing member of my team. I'd like to be clear, I'm not a conduit. So other people have relationships with other parts of the organization, as they absolutely should. But it's my focus in a way that it isn't for the rest of my team. So yeah, I would say that I'm kind of this orange blob in between the delivery team and the business. And I'm kind of funneling information and prioritization decisions and ideas between the two, basically. But I would just like to stress again that these terms are really used interchangeably and to describe completely different jobs. Product management and product roles aren't like accounting, and there's no clearly defined roles, exams, qualifications, anything like that. So, well, other than Scrum Alliance and a couple of others, but they aren't universally recognized and adhered to. So if you're looking for this type of role in digital, search for all of these titles and do your homework on the organization and talk to the person who's hiring you so that you understand exactly what's going to be expected of you if you take it. So moving on now to how you fit into the team. This is, again, a beautifully designed slide. Just showing some of the teams that I've worked in the past. And I've deliberately chosen them at points when they've been particularly different. So the team on the far left was the team that I worked in at the Government Digital Service. It was a data science team. And you can see that it's dominated by data scientists and has like a policy advisor in there because of the fact that we were in government. Then that middle team is actually a team from DWP, so the Department of Work and Pensions. So that had a lot of software development, a lot of business analysis involved because it's obviously a very complicated historical service. Security architects and technical architects baked into the team because of the complexity of the wider organization. And then the one on the right is the team that I'm in at the moment, although I've since joining, added quite a few user-centered roles to this because I felt like it was a bit imbalanced towards the software development and technical kind of side. But basically, whether you do Scrum, Kanban, Lean, Agile with a capital A, whether you work in sprints or OKRs or missions or goals, you'll have some kind of multidisciplinary team. And this is just a fancy way of saying a team of people with different backgrounds and expertise rather than an all trained in the same profession team. And so, you know, my husband works at HMRC, he's an economist, all of his members of staff, all of his team, they're all economists, they're all working in different areas, but they're all trained in the same way, doing the same job, bringing the same kind of expertise, and they're kind of in a hierarchical function, whereas a multidisciplinary team is not at all like that. I don't want to talk too much about agile teams in general, but I feel quite strongly that an agile team is valuable because it gives everybody the chance to contribute their own perspectives and ways of solving a problem. So a security expert should be able to really focus on the security risks of a piece of work, and a designer should be pushing for the perfect user experience, and a developer should want to write the most beautiful code they can. And actually, as a product manager, it's up to you to listen to all of these different viewpoints and then try and figure out the best way forward that incorporates all of those biases, I suppose, but bias in a good way. And ideally that would be by facilitating your team to come to a decision, but sometimes you can't all agree, and that is often what leads to you having to make a decision, which is one of those things that people talk about product managers being the decision makers, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But you do need to be able to understand all of those different points of view. The other thing to know is that each of these different people in the team will be on their own career paths usually. And so you might have, for example, a lead content designer and a junior software developer and a working level something else. And that doesn't really matter because, again, like I said, you've got all of these different viewpoints and they're here to represent a particular specialism. And so there isn't actually any kind of hierarchy in terms of like the length of time that you've been your role or the amount of time that you've been a particular person. So I kind of like to say that there are no hippos in the room. I'm sure everyone's heard highest paid person's opinion. Well, there isn't one in an agile team. So I'd be remiss if I didn't cover some of the things that you've probably heard about if you've been interested in the project management role, which are the tools of the trade. So I'll just walk through some of these. They're things that people will often expect you as a product manager or a product owner to create, own, have an opinion on. Everybody does these things differently. It's really easy to think that everybody who's doing product management and has been doing product management for a while has the answer, and they're all doing the same thing and they understand it in exactly the same way, and they don't. And the truth is that it will be different for different jobs as well, and what might work in one job might not work in another. So this is a product roadmap, and this is the one that I have at the moment for the identity service in Co-op. You can see it's a really high level view of where the team is going and what we're trying to achieve. And I've used Product Plan here, which is one of the online software tools. It's paid for tool, so it's something that your company has to invest in. I've seen product roadmaps in Excel, I've seen them in PowerPoint, I've seen them physically up on the wall with post-it notes. It really doesn't matter how you do it. The point is that you have something that you can share with other people, both inside the team and outside the team, to show what you're working on next and why. So that is all a product roadmap is at the end of the day. And getting stressed about the format isn't really worth it. Then there's a product backlog, which is a different thing, and something that I've been asked about a lot in product interviews, actually. So how would you prioritize your product backlog? And it's you crack out the value to effort ratios, and like there's lots of things like, is it blocking anything else, or what's the cost implications of doing this or like not doing this, and cost of delay, and there are loads of different ways that you can calculate stuff, but in reality it often comes down to a bit of gut feel as well. This is probably the most organized backlog I've had in a team. This is the one that we use. We have the backlog in Trello. I have different members of my team kind of acting as experts in different columns, and they kind of bring issues to this board, and they can be really, really small things as well as big things. So the roadmap will be stuff that's maybe a few months would probably be my limit. Anything that was less than a month's worth of work I wouldn't have on the roadmap. It would just be too small to represent. Whereas a backlog can have literally anything of any size on it. And it's a great way to collect all of the ideas from the team, but like sift through them so that you work out like which pieces of work make sense to go together, and also like which is the most important thing to do next. So yeah, that's my example in Trello. Then there's the team wall or board. So this is the thing that you are using on a day-to-day basis. So all of the team will have potentially tickets on this. Again, you can do this in different ways. We use Jira. You can just use a physical wall. Obviously, that's a little bit harder at the moment. This is what people use for stand-up usually, and they refer to it and they see how work is flowing through it. You can see we're using a Kanban model, and there's plenty of sprint models as well that you can have a go at. It really doesn't matter. Again, I think it's about the principles of showing the work that is going on and having a clear prioritized list of things that you're going to be working on that week, and having a sense of what's achievable and what isn't in the time that you have, and having that conversation and check-in so that everybody's aware of what everyone else is doing. And then the project vision and strategy. So this is like the holy grail, and not actually something that's very easy to achieve, and it's never really finished, and you'll have to repeat it again and again and again and again and again and again and again to make sure that it sinks in with people. The one on the right that I've given is a vision that I wrote for the data science team at the Government Digital Service. And I'm not going to go into all the like what makes a good vision, because it would take quite a while. I have written a blog post about this, and I'm happy to share that if people would find it useful. But this probably is the best vision that I've written, and I know it's the best one because it's the one that I can always tout off the top of my head, even like years after the effect. And it's good because it clearly defines who we're targeting, but it keeps it open enough that we have room to flex and grow, and it won't be finished in a couple of months' time. It's got to be like a really long-term thing. And it defines like what we're trying to make better. And then the missions that I had underneath this, I had four, need to count fingers, 4 missions underneath this, which were to improve data literacy, which was like a program of kind of support for people who weren't data specialists but who were commissioning data products and data work, so that they could understand and be more sensible in their commissioning practices, and build capability. So that was about like getting existing data analysts to learn data science skills. To demonstrate the opportunity was our 3rd mission, which we were doing via like delivering exemplar data science projects, and then also helping to tackle operational barriers was our 4th mission. And that was like some really boring kind of documentation support, which was actually really helpful for other government departments. And so yeah, that's a bit of a potted history of one of my successful visions, but visions and strategies can take really different forms depending on the size of your service or your organization. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Then I've gone on to just talk a little bit more in detail about a week in my life, I guess, which feels a bit odd. But I thought if I was thinking about getting into a digital career, which I guess I was about 5 or 6 years ago, then this is the kind of stuff that I wanted to know. I wanted to know what I'd actually be doing all day if I swapped and became a digital product manager. And this is what I do. So this is a pretty typical week for me. I think it was a couple of weeks ago now. A lot of my work is meetings, and I know that's really unfashionable to say, and actually I've always been really annoyed at people who think that turning up to a meeting is the work, because usually a meeting is actually just talking about what you're going to do, and then the work is done outside the meeting. However, for product managers, I think I have to be honest that a lot of my work is meetings, because actually as a PM, you have to recognize that your job is about listening and sharing and facilitating and collaborating a lot of the time. And so it's not that surprising that it leads to a lot of meetings. And then the work is often delivered by your teams. So yeah, it's not so uncomfortable, I guess, now that I think about it, that a lot of my week is spent in meetings. And And then on the next slide, I have just highlighted like some of the regular things that we have in my week that kind of show how I lead my team, and just to be really clear about the difference between managing and leading. And actually, this is interesting. Our head of digital has an opinion. He calls us product leads rather than product managers in our organization, because he feels quite strongly about the difference between managing and leading. Because managing is about assigning work and telling people what to do, and leading is about showing people how you want them to behave and sharing with them where you're trying to get to, and kind of empowering them to tell you how they think we can get there. So it's quite a different kind of behavior. And I think the best product managers really are product leads rather than product managers. So the common themes in my week, which I have again and again, are we have planning on a Monday morning. And that's where we kind of break down the work and decide who's doing what for the week. And then there's a midweek check-in against the planning that we had on Monday. And then on Thursday, I start to think about the goals for next week. And I'll write some draft ones. I have like a drafting Confluence that I update every week, and I'll share them on Slack so that the team have a chance to have a look at them. And then I run a drop-in session in the afternoon on Thursdays where anyone from the team can come along and either challenge what I've suggested or bring their own ideas, or just drop in and hear what's being discussed. And then on Fridays, we have a show and tell with the wider membership team, and we kind of show the work that we've been doing and celebrate the successes of what we've done, and start all over again on Monday with planning. So we work in a weekly cycle with a Kanban model of like pulling work through as soon as we're ready to take it in. But a lot of people work in 2-week sprints. That's how I used to work at DWP Digital. And there will be potentially other names for some of these meetings. Backlog refinement. I think someone called it backlog grooming at one point, but that just sounds a bit odd. So thankfully that seems to have been abandoned as a title. So there are other meetings that you can run. What I didn't put in there is the retro, but that's kind of because I don't run that, but I'm part of it every week. And there's another meeting with the wider operational teams on a Monday afternoon that is an opportunity for me to connect with other people in the team as well, and find out like what different teams across my group are doing, which is also really helpful. So yeah, that's what my week tends to look like. A lot of meetings, but usually really useful ones, and a regular cadence of kind of like understanding the ideas that the team have got, understanding what work we might need to do next, kind of sharing ideas on what is the most important thing from my perspective, and gathering whether or not that's what the team think is important to do next as well. Okay, so I think this is kind of, pretty much the last section now. So skills and behaviors, or what a good product manager should be. So a really good product manager understands their users, but they understand that they are not their users. It's really easy when you are a product manager who spends all your day thinking about your product and immersed in all the details of the experiences to think that you know your product or service well enough to make decisions about what's the most important thing for a user, or what makes sense for them or doesn't, because you're dealing with the product every day, but you are not your user. And you definitely shouldn't think that you are your user. And that's why we have user researchers, and why they're so valuable, and why you need to remember to take time regularly to talk to people who are using your service or your product and understand their needs and expectations. A good product manager also manages to stay focused on what's most valuable. So value can be defined in lots of different ways, and it might be different for different organizations. So understanding and aligning on what value actually is for you in your particular context, for your product, for your service in your organization, is really important. And staying focused on that thing and delivering that thing above everything else can be really hard. It can be really hard when you're in a team of people who have strong opinions in lots of different directions, to persuade them that you just need to finish this thing, and it maybe doesn't need to be perfect. It maybe just needs to be good enough. But that's the role of the product manager, to make sure that you're working on the most valuable thing and you're getting it finished and you're releasing that value for your users. Another thing that I think marks out good product managers is that they define problems and not solutions. It's so hard not to solutionize. I am guilty of this all the time. I have to keep my mouth shut. But it's not your job to come up with the solutions to the problems. It's your job to find the right problems, the most valuable problems, the problems that are causing the most issues, and give them to your team in a really clear way that is aligned with how the rest of the organization sees and understands the problem, so that they can solve that issue. And when they solve it, they'll get the recognition that they deserve for having solved something that's important to the business. So it kind of works both ways in terms of you've got to make sure that the problem is understood both by your stakeholders and by your team in the same way, and that you're aligned to the same measures of success or failure. Yes, this is one of my favorites. I think product managers have to be collaborative. There's so many people in digital teams transfer into product management because they want the power, and they think that the power resides in the product manager. And I was talking to someone who I've done a profile of a little bit later on about this, and he said that was the reason why he transferred into this role, and he'd had a very rude awakening, because as a product manager, you're not the boss. You do have decision-making authority, and you do have like strategic, like goal setting responsibilities. And so it's easy to kid yourself that you are the boss because you have some of those boss-like responsibilities. But in reality, you're no more senior than any member of your team. And you actually really need to work hard to earn the respect of your colleagues, to make sure that when you do make decisions, that they're gonna like respect them and move forwards with them and contribute to that work moving forwards in the best way possible. So if you can't be collaborative, then it's going to be really hard to bring a team with you on the journey and get the best possible work out of everybody. So I think everyone can have their own style, but I do think being collaborative is really important. Has empathy. So Kit Collingwood wrote a really interesting blog about this for civil servants in particular, and digital teams in the civil service, but I think it's more broadly applicable. You really need to be able to understand people to do this job. You need to understand your team, and you need to understand your stakeholders, and you need to understand your users. And I think sometimes people focus on the users and making sure that we're meeting their needs, and then they kind of treat stakeholders like this, like nasty hippo or like irritating thing that they need to handle outside of that. But your stakeholders are just as important as your users. They're just different types of users and different people that you're collaborating with. So I think having empathy for all of the sides of the coin is a really important skill. Is a good communicator. You need to make things simple. If you're a product manager, you need to make sure that people with very different expertise understand what everybody else's jobs are, and you need to be able to explain why you're doing what you're doing. And so that is really important. So in summary, I think I've reached my time. So I put in these 2 slides to summarize like my main thoughts about this. So one is that there's no definition of a product manager or management, and different organizations will do it differently and call it different things. So you just need to do your research to understand whether or not that role that you're applying for is the role that you think you wanted. And the other one is that being a good product manager is more about behaviors than skills. If you're a strong communicator, a strategic thinker, you're good at staying focused on achieving a goal, then you'll make a better product manager than someone who's written 100 roadmaps or prioritized 1,000 backlogs and done other product management-y things. So yeah, I would encourage people who feel like they have that kind of personality almost to consider this role, because it might be for you and you might make an excellent one, even if you haven't been in it for a long time. That's me. I'm on Twitter if you want to ask me questions.